Yeah, great.
So what a,
I was born 79.
yeah, well, I guess as a young teenager growing up, what a great time for BMX to kind of come along.
Yeah.
I was into motorcycles. I was racing motorcycles, mini bikes at the time, and I used to always buy naturally magazines. There was no social media, so
Yeah.
you grab a magazine from the local newsagents and have a look at it. But you know, looking through it, BMX started popping up in all the motorcycle magazines, and I guess at the start you kind of looked and go, "Oh, what's this? What's this sort of thing?" But I guess BMX, when you really think about it, BMX, it turned into that form, that 20-inch triangle type frame
Yeah.
form.
Which
But-
certainly stuck around for a lot of years, didn't it?
Yeah.
Even today, it's still prominent.
But you think about it, prior to that, kids were kind of, in a way, doing BMX, racing each other, mucking around, doing tricks. I mean, it'd been going on for decades prior to BMX coming along, on a dragster, doing this, doing that. But when the bikes started finally probably converting dragsters, put motorcycle handlebars on your bike and then you put a little seat on it, get rid of the banana seat, you kind of turn it into that version of a first BMX bike.
Yeah.
And then I guess from that, that's where it all came from into whoever invented the first type of frame
Yeah.
BMX bike. But I always look at it and think tricks, racing, jumping, mucking around with your friends, that was now because of social media, you see that and you see things popping up from even in the 30s when guys were doing backflips on 26-inch racer type
Yeah.
bikes and you think to yourself, are you insane? But it's always kind of been around, and I think everybody's brought their own flavour to it, and BMX brought that flavour to it. So in probably 78 was the first time really that I was at a motorcycle racing meet, racing, and a kid said to me, oh, there's this guy, he's going to organise this BMX race. And I said, oh yeah, what's that about? And it was at Police Paddocks in Dandenong.
Yeah.
So it was basically, well, there was no track there as such. There was probably a walking trail, but the walking trail was on the side of a hill. So we all organised between us and turned up one day, and there was only probably about a dozen of us. So we turned up with our bikes, we turned up with shovels, and it was almost like a working bee race, sort of let's get together and see what all this is about.
Yeah.
And that was one of the funnest days ever. I'll never forget that day because everybody rolled up and everybody had different styles of bike. I think the guy who actually organised it was Pat Dillon, and that was the first time I met Pat Dillon from PRM.
Yep.
And he'd organised it, and I think he had the first kind of diamond frame BMX bike, and we were all so excited to see that kind
Googling
of.
over it.
And then we just, for the day, we just typical guys, just hanging out. We made some jumps, we raced each other, we crashed, we laughed.
Yeah.
It just had a great time, and that was probably 1978 that
Okay.
started. So it wasn't an official race, it was just guys hanging out,
Yeah.
having a cool time and all that, but just that vibe of what it was about, it was just awesome. Because I guess compare that to motorcycles, like racing mini bikes and that, you had to pack everything up, you had this, you had
It was
costume.
probably more of like a freedom sort of thing, wasn't it?
It was.
There was no rules, there was no one to tell you this is what you got to do, anything like that. It was just go out and do what you want to do kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And look, we all just either rode our bikes to school or we, came home from school and got on our bikes and went out and mucked around with your friends
Yeah.
doing things. So bikes were always part of just your life type
Yeah.
of thing, just spinning around. So it was just an extension all the time of what you did with your bike type of thing. Well, certainly in my life and all my friends that I was hanging around with.
Yeah.
And then probably from that, kids were just hanging around, building jumps, doing all the regular thing. But then in 1979, the same guy, Pat Dillon, he organised a race at an old mini bike track in Springvale in April, I think it was. And it was just this gravelly old crappy track. It was.
That wasn't the old Spring Valley, was it?
It was down
Near all the tips
Virginia
and that?
Street in Springvale.
Oh, I can't remember where it was, but yeah, there was the old Spring Valley track.
No. This
No?
was just this little. It was a cross between a go-kart off-road track
okay.
and a mini bike track. It was all gravel, big boulders. It was pretty hilarious. And Pat Dillon organised that with his family. And his dad actually made up these ramps.
Yeah.
And because there was no jumps on the track, it was just a flat track. And his dad made up these wooden ramps, and the wooden ramps just went from dead flat on a 45. So when you rode up, there wasn't a transition going up. You just just hit the front of this thing and just hope for the best when you took off. And most of us all ended up in a wreck on the other side of it. There was no starting gate. We just stood all our bikes up and had like a Lehman start, and we'd run from the fence, jumping our bikes. And back in those days, you know, everybody's just dogging and hitting each other and going around the track. And then I remember it rained, and it was just pouring with rain, and the whole thing turned into bog. And it was just another great day. And I feel so privileged that I was part of that start. And that was really the start point of it here. And then obviously from there, guys like Alan Dorman started the Lalor track.
Yeah.
And that was probably later 1979. So he got a whole track going. And again, we'd all jump on the train.
Phenomenal in that time.
Oh, it was like the Disneyland for us. We'd hop on the train and we'd all pile
had
across.
BMX really taken off racing wise in the States, or anything that you knew of in that time, or was that going to be like the first track that you'd ever really known about?
Yeah, through the magazines, through the motorcycle magazines, I'd seen the old tracks of Corona, all the downhill tracks, and they were racing there. They had all that going on. So we were aware of the racing. So I guess because you'd never seen footage or anything like that, you were just seeing still shots in magazines.
It's not like you had the social media back then. So, you know, to find out how it was evolving in the rest of the world compared to here, to have a track in Lalor then, you kind of had to know what you were going to be doing to be able to build that track, yeah?
That's right. And look, he put that whole thing together terrifically at the time for what it was. Everybody, that was the Mecca in Victoria. That was the place you went to and raced your bikes. And then they had a race meeting there.
Well, quick fun fact for you, do you know Lalor is about to get redone?
Oh, is it really?
Apparently word is out on the street that they're trying to get it rebuilt and back up to standard and put it as one of the rounds again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it might be up and going again. That's word around the street, who knows? But
that would be unbelievable, because it's almost 40 years since BMX came to Australia.
Yep. And it was the first track.
Down here. Obviously it started, I believe it started in Brisbane or Sydney first, the first tracks up there and racing and that. So it was kind of going up there before Victoria got its go on it a year later or something like that. But once he got that going, Alan Dorman, he was such a promoter of BMX. He was the ringleader of BMX. He was everything of BMX. I think everyone looked up to Alan, you know, as far as what he was doing.
So did he already have the shop then, or?
Yeah, he had his shop, Crank and Chain.
Yep.
Which was, I think, in Reservoir or Epping or somewhere around there.
Okay.
And he had his own little team and all that sort of thing. But I guess because BMX was so new, you know, everything you've seen on a kid was new. And every week you'd see something new. It's not like you'd turn up there and go, oh yeah, you know, it's just another bike. It's not. You were looking for stuff, and people would crowd around, and if someone had a new pedal or a tyre or something that everybody else didn't have, it was just that excitement of it. It just was a great time to be part of that infancy of BMX here.
Yeah, it would have been phenomenal.
And then once they obviously got the racing going, well,
take it to the next level.
People started flooding in, and everyone, I mean, I think at the time BMX became the most popular sport in the country. Like there was just masses of kids just flocking to this new kind of skateboarding type sport, which was BMX, and everybody wanted it. And it was accessible to anyone as far as kids go, because like I said, most kids had a bike, and even if you didn't have a BMX bike, you could kind of modify your dragster, or you could do this, but you could still turn up at the jumps at your local park or whatever, and everyone just accepted you, and you just went crazy and had a good time and went home.
And of course, from what I've always seen, the guys that used to race in those days weren't just race discipline, were they? And I think yourself too, you were across the board. You were able to go and ride at the park, you're doing freestyle, you'd be able to do flatland, you'd be able to do race, and it was like you guys just had all that all the time, you know, whereas these days it's very, You know, you do that, you do that, you do that. Everyone's different disciplines of bike riding, but you know, back in your time, everyone was able to do everything, weren't they?
Yeah, and I think that's so perfect that you brought that up, because it was about having fun first.
Yeah.
It wasn't about sponsorship, getting money, anything. It was just about having a great time. And if you ever got any of the other things, that was just a bonus, because really at the end of the day, you would have been doing it regardless of that.
Yeah.
And like you said, you could do anything at any time. There was no rules really, you
No.
know. Yeah, there was rules obviously when you raced, type of thing. But even racing back then, when you look back at some old footage, if you see the racing was hard.
Yeah.
Racing was really hard. If you could get around the
Competitive.
first corner at a track, you know,
And
without
survive without coming off.
someone knocking you over the boom, it was almost like people would line you up and just, oh, well, if I'm on the inside and these guys are on the outside, the first thing I'm doing is taking him over the top.
Well, come on, take us through some of your best tussles. Who were you really elbow to elbow with?
Oh, look, mate, I was happy just to be in amongst the pack. You know, but that's very much what racing was like.
Yeah.
It was. You were locking elbows and you were dogging all the time. It was good. It wasn't, I don't think, as clean as what it is now.
Yeah.
But it was.
Well, I think that's probably because too the tracks now are a lot more refined, and I mean, look at the size of the jumps that they're sort of dealing
Yeah.
with as well. You know, these guys are hitting 50 kilometres an hour.
Yes.
And hitting jumps that, well, I'd say back in the 70s and 80s that the motocross guys were probably
Yeah.
hitting.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
they've had to implement a lot more rules, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, when you look back at a lot of those old videos and stuff, they were basically just hitting rollers, weren't you? And just launching off them.
Yeah, but or you just do anything.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah, it was like that. But I guess like in any sport, it has its initial, you know, part where it starts, and then as definitely watching BMX from where it started and what we used to do and all that, to then I'll never, you know, like I remember probably one of the first guys, Jamie Hales, when he started doing like race type jumps, where I mean, everybody was happy just to get over the jump in one piece and then just ride off type of thing. But when you got someone like him that brought a style in that you lifted your front wheel up and went over the jump, and then you sort of tucked behind your back wheel, so you kept all your bike basically on the ground.
Yeah.
That was like a whole new innovation type of thing. Thought, wow, check that out. That's just crazy. You just, you know, you keep pedaling, you go over, not just launching and, you know,
Hoping
just
for the best.
off you go again type of thing. So just those little small things that seem just nothing now, they were huge advances in BMX, and through like the whoops and that, you know, guys like you see now, I mean, it's just commonplace. People like manualing sort of through everything. Back then, people were still jumping, but when you seen guys who could really balance their bikes and go through it, that was just a big thing. It was huge to see that kind of, you know, kind of talent on guys. So you know, and girls, they were doing it as well.
Yep.
But it was really probably that part of BMX was just, it was a whole learning curve for everybody. I mean riders, officials, you know, everybody who was involved in BMX. It was just something new. So there was nobody had anything to go off.
Yeah.
This was like it was going to pan out the way it was going to pan out.
Yep.
So it was great. It was a great time.
It would have been, for sure. And I mean, okay, so we're 79 lay laws now up and going. Where to from there? Did you sort of end up with the BMX? So you started your racing, and then where did you progress to from there?
Well, I was obviously with most of the guys, we were all racing at the time. And like I said, if you want to call it the tricks or the freestyle side of it back then, it was just like going to jumps. And I kind of always thought I was a dirt jumper because I always loved jumping because of my motorcycle and all that. And getting on a BMX bike compared to jumping a motorcycle was like jumping a skateboard. It was just, there was nothing of it. So actually one of my motocross friends who was a supercross and motocross champion, Peter Whitington, who lived near me, we would always go down to the local jump, and it was quite funny to see two guys with motorcycle backgrounds compared to just kids who were getting into BMX, trying to find their way, because like I said, it was, you're already kind of in the groove of it. So jumping and basically breaking your bike every week was kind of just the norm. It was fun.
Yeah.
But then racing, I enjoyed racing and I did okay at racing. But there was always probably something within me that I like just hanging out with my friends and doing jumps and no one telling me what to do, or, you know, this is the way you've got to race, or this is what you've got to do, and all that kind of thing. I kind of didn't dig any of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess as it progressed, and then freestyle, well, at the time it was called trick riding, it sort of started to float into BMX. And like I said before, people have been doing tricks forever type of thing. This was the version of somebody, you know, bringing it to BMX, which was Bob Harrow, who brought that into BMX. And probably like most guys back then, you saw him in a magazine doing a rock walk.
Yeah.
I mean, a rock walk, you know, these days just seems so basic, but it was leaps and bounds ahead of anything that you've ever seen before. And once you sort of had this how-to thing of turning your bike around and then rolling away, it was like, that's just crazy. That was
Next
crazy.
level again.
Yeah, so I guess at the time you sort of think, okay, I'm going to have a go at this. And once you kind of picked that up, I guess it just gave you a freedom again that you thought, you know, there's no rules to doing this. I can do this after school. Like, I can do it whenever I feel like it. Nobody's going to tell me why, how. You can have your version of doing it, which kids did have.
Yeah.
And then it all ended up going into something else. And it's like anything. You see somebody do one thing and then someone takes it to another level and someone take that to another level. And you wonder where it'll stop, but it'll never stop because there'll always be someone with an imagination that want to take something even further. And that was the same thing with him. And I think that's what pushed it and that's what forced it through. So those early 80s were another great time because it was all new, it was all exciting, it was just crazy type times of finding yourself and what you wanted to do with what BMX was about to you.
Yep.
So look, it's such an honour really to look back and think I was that age, being in that time. It was almost like being in the right spot at the right time
Yep.
to be what you wanted to be and do what you wanted to do. And then obviously trick riding became freestyle, the word, and it took off. It just took off.
Brought it to another level again.
It did. And I think guys who were racing, guys transitioned
Kind of
over.
Shifted over, yeah.
Guys did both. But it was just another arm of BMX. And I think at the start people were worried that it wouldn't work in together. It was kind of like a bit of a rivalry between freestyle, and because it was getting a lot of coverage in the magazines, and racing was getting less type of
Well, there
thing.
was even tours going on, so
Yeah.
as opposed to BMX, you know, you have to go to a track and it was just a race day, whereas the freestyle were, you know, like you said, Bob Harrow and that was starting to do tours around the places.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and you were involved with a few of those, I believe, as well.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, the tours, you're almost like a travelling circus type of thing with your bike. You know, you took this, whatever you had, and you took it out, and you're almost like an ambassador for the sport of freestyle, because, or an unofficial ambassador. You took it out, and you were always pushing freestyle, what it was about, showing people tricks and freestyle and ramps and all that sort of thing, and that actually got more kids into it because they would come to a show, they might thought, oh, what's this about? And then the next minute they'd walk away from the show and, Mum, Dad, get me a freestyle bike. I want to do that ramp thing, or I want to do that thing on the ground. Or they'd go home and they'd get their bike out and try that trick.
Yep.
So that also kept moving it about all the time. So everybody who was part of it in the early days were, like I said, kind of an unofficial ambassador for it, because it was just that progression that kept pushing it forward, and you had to do something to let someone else take that and get it forward. And to me, there were guys who were put up on pedestals as far as, you know, they would do this trick and that trick, but then another guy would come along and, if you want to call it, better that trick and then better that one again. It would just keep going, and that's what's still happening today.
Completely,
I mean,
definitely.
it's out of control. It's mad what's happening.
Now it's more like video game tricks. So what they're doing, you just sit there and go, I couldn't even see half of that.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But it seems to be the norm now.
Yeah.
If you're a 14-year-old boy or whatever coming into into freestyle or that kind of X game type of riding, a backflip's like doing a wheelie, you know,
Pretty much nowadays.
doing all that other stuff's just like doing other things that we did, which was sort of, you know, expected at the time. But it's crazy. I really love where it's gone. I think it's fantastic. But where it's going to stop, who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? It's just,
It certainly had a plateau there for a while, I believe, through probably late 90s, early 2000s, where, you know, there were some pretty extreme tricks, but then it sort of plateaued a little bit, and it took like a whole new revolution or a new group of riders to start pushing the envelope, similar to what would have been in your time, you know, the first of the guys starting the trick riding and all that. And they've pushed the envelope again now, and it's opened up a whole can of worms with what they're doing. I mean, with these mega ramps and stuff now, they've got so much time. It's just crazy the amount of time they've got in the air now.
yeah,
So they're able to pull these things, but, you know, you guys were trialing this sort of stuff on stuff that these kids wouldn't even ride these days. They'd look at it and go, no, that ramp's way too sketchy. I'm not going off that.
That's
And
right.
yet you guys were putting shows together and the whole bit. I mean, going back to how far you went back, you know, when you started on the tours with Harrow and all that sort of thing, you must have looked at them and gone, these are pretty sketchy ramps, these are sketchy bikes, even though in the day they were the top there was. But you still must have been going, hang on a second, like, there's nothing on the edge of these ramps. We don't get to practice on anything. Like now we've got foam pits and resi boxes and all that. You guys were hitting it first up or dying, basically.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, you got one chance.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you first got onto how did you actually survive those first few times when you were starting freestyle? You know, how did you go about all that?
I think, like you said, I think you tried to work it out the best you could in your head.
Yeah.
And if you went out and did shows as well, sometimes you might go interstate, you might go here, you might go there, and it wasn't feasible to take your ramps from a cost point of view. You couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So you used to end up at these places, and someone would supply you with a ramp, and you would.
So you wouldn't even know what you were actually hitting until you got there.
That's right. And it was funny because I had this conversation with Eddie Fiola, and he's, you know, like him touring around the world, and he would turn up to places just like we would turn up to places here, and you'd look at this thing and someone had made this ramp out of an old pack of doors out of their house, and you're looking at it and you're going, really? I got to ride that? And somehow you pulled it together. I don't know how, but you kind of pulled it together. But again, I guess that was part of the whole start of it. And look, I guess at the start, you did what you had to do. Money or sponsorship or anything like that, it wasn't an option. You kind of made the best of what you had, and you'd turn up and you just do what you wanted to do.
Well, speaking of sponsors and that, so who was your first sponsor when and what year did that sort of all begin for you? Because I mean, that was where you started to turn, wasn't it? Where it became more of a profession for you.
Yeah, I guess like from racing, I had like little sponsors through racing with, you know, frames and bits and pieces and this, that, and the rest of it. But I actually, once I sort of got a bit more into it and actual sponsorship came into it, my first sponsorship actually was from Skyway USA. And I went up to the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney and rode with Karen Hood and Wes Richards, and we did like a little halftime type show there. And Ken Costa, who was running Skyway at the time, they were there with Andy Patterson, the racers and that, and we were doing our show. And he came up to me after it, and at the time I was riding a Mongoose with Aussie Tough Wheels and all this other stuff. The bike weighed a ton. And he came up to me and just offered me a deal, and I just said, well, why not? You know, let's do this. So, you know, I ended up riding a TA and Tough Wheels and all that sort of thing for a while, and that was great. And then started getting more and more into shows and doing all that sort of thing, because that kind of spurred me on. And Ken was fantastic. He just, I guess, growing up as a kid, when somebody I guess has faith in you or believes in you and what you're doing, you're in 100% and you're not going to let them down. So that's where I was trying to book as many freestyle shows as I could, do them if I could get some money out of it, great. If I didn't care. I'd just go and do it. I got involved with like the state government, doing bike weeks and all sorts of safety type of things and bits and pieces like that. But we were almost going out every weekend doing shows all the time. It was just fantastic. You know, it was just, again, hanging out with your friends and doing what you were doing. But then it probably picked up a lot more. Repco Bicycles here, Frank Nactical, who was here in Melbourne, they were bringing in the Haro brand. And part of that was they were obviously talking with Haro, and Bob obviously knew Ken Costa at Skyway because he was riding Skyway wheels and that. And I guess there was just word around of a kid in Australia doing what he was doing, kind of the same as what they were doing over there. And then I really don't even know how it happened, but next minute it almost felt like I was off Skyway and I was on Haro. And you know, it sort of a turbulent time, and I just moved from that and ended up on a Haro. And then I thought, at the time, Haro was like the brand, especially in freestyle. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. I've got to this brand now and riding this brand and promoting this brand. So that was an exciting time to do that. And everyone was about Haro because Haro was freestyle. Haro was tricks, shows, everything else. Everyone else followed that model type of thing and came along with it. And then from there, I packed up and went to the US, and fortunate enough, Bob was fantastic to me. Like he didn't fluff me off or anything. You know, I stayed with him. We go on the old Haro, which was just a little shop, and it was amazing what used to pump out of that little place. And that was just more than anything, and I've said it before with Bob, watching this guy, not that much older than me, he was only a couple of years older than me, but I didn't really know anyone in business as such that wasn't young at the time. And he's a kid that's like 22 years old, and it was like his whole dream had come true. And it was just amazing to watch this young bloke do what he was doing, and he was taking on the world. He wasn't just taking on the US, he was taking on the world. And the inspiration that I personally walked away from that was like, wow, anything's possible. So walked away from that, came back, to Australia, and that egged me on even harder with riding and with my number plates and all sorts of things. So that was a huge turning point. But not only, like I said, his whole setup that he had, but just like I said, just the fact that he was a young bloke and he really seemed to have his act together. He had a determination to get somewhere, and that was just unbelievable to watch. That was just fantastic. And as we all know, he did.
Didn't he ever?
He did. Yeah.
And he's certainly gone from strength to strength right through all the years, hasn't he?
Oh, definitely. I guess you look at BMX and you look at, yes, there are a lot of people who innovated things, but you look at...
Yeah, but there's that certain pinnacle of people in the BMX scene that you mention a name and they're at that top pinnacle.
That's right.
People like your Eddie Fiola, Bob Harrow, and probably Matt Hoffman.
Yeah.
And there'd be a few others around that sort of pinnacle, that hierarchy.
Yeah.
That are up there. And, anyone in BMX, you mentioned the name Bob Harrow and they know exactly who you're talking about.
Definitely.
He certainly cemented that into the world of BMX, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. They're a part of an elite group, and even going over to the racing side, like your Stu Thompsons and, like he was a hero of mine, Stu Thompson, like many kids.
Yeah.
But just amazing. These guys who... It's funny how these guys were your heroes, still are. You had their posters on your wall. Yeah. You thought about all the things that they were doing, and it kind of inspired you. And the crazy thing about life is, 1 minute, these people are just pictures on your wall. Next minute, you're hanging out with them and your teammates, your friends. It's just crazy how things work out. Gave racing away, I'd say 82, around about that.
So pretty early on.
Yeah, I'd probably... Look, I like I said, I liked racing, but this other thing,
Way more fun.
it just, it was way more fun. And again, I go back to the roots of it all. I just love going down the local park and jumping with my friends. And freestyle was kind of like, that gave me that same feeling where racing, if you wanted to be good at racing, you had to train, you had to do that sort of thing. And that was like, man, I'm a kid, I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to go to school. So I don't want to train, I just want to turn up and have a good time. So that's what freestyle, gave us. So I think 82, 83, I sort of gave racing away and moved on to the other thing, and then really freestyled from there. And like I said, I guess a big turning point was turning up in the US in 83 with the Haro thing and all that, and then coming back and just, it seems how much got shoved into the next 2-3 years was just crazy as far as riding, touring.
Well, you were telling us earlier on, I remember you telling me the stories about your sponsors and that, and how people would just, they literally line up and just throw stuff at you, sponsorship-wise, like Vans and all these kind of companies back in those times were just giving you everything you could possibly imagine. Yeah,
I guess that was probably the good side of freestyle. You're almost like a portable billboard for sponsors.
Yeah.
And because you weren't just going to a track as such and the BMX people, you were going to like a community outside public type places. So everyone would see it type of thing. So if you could, sign write your ramps, and we would do deals with, like different clothing companies or anything. And 1 minute we'd have something on our ramp, and the next minute would be another brand. And people used to
Get out
say,
the rattle cans, boys.
Yeah, where you at? Where you at? But when people were just interested in backing you and see you moving around all the time, and I guess they're trying to get to the youth and they're trying to get to that market.
Yeah.
Ours was a good sort of little outlet for them to try and, have their name around all the time. So we would chop and change all the time with different things, and things that would, because it cost a lot of money to keep going to these places, fuel, cars, ramps, guys, accommodation, food, everything. Like plenty of times, you just do yourself over. But it wasn't you didn't look at it that way.
Yeah.
You just finished it up, and then you went, wow, I'm out of pocket $1,000 here, which was a lot of money back then. And you thought, oh, wow, I've got to make that up. So, or we won't be able to get to the next one or do the next one, type of thing. And then like going into the US and seeing the way their tours were set up, it was just phenomenal. It was just it was a whole different ball game. It was pre-set up from like the main manufacturers like GT or Haro or Skyway or whoever. And basically they brought you all together. It was quite funny when you think about it. You're only young kids and they put you in a van with ramps and a trailer and blah, blah, blah.
Send you off wherever.
You almost got like an itinerary of where you're going to go, and bang, off you go.
Road trip.
Yep, road trip. Just off you go. And like I said,
that would be the dream though, wouldn't it?
You're kind of just innocent kids when you
BMX
look back.
in the back of the car and you're just road tripping around either Australia or America or wherever you're being sent. Jeez.
And you're just having fun, and again, it was the same here in Australia. Just pack up everything and go, and just probably hope for the best.
Yeah.
And if you crash and you broke your leg or your arm or whatever,
going.
try and keep going, or get yourself patched up for the next one.
So who did you end up touring with then in Australia when you were doing the shows here?
Yeah, well, my first, the first guy actually, when I started my cassette number plates, and I actually started my team from then, and that was actually to promote. It all sort of fell hand in hand. I started the team in conjunction with my number plates, and then freestyle was here, and again I was watching from just a distance about what other people were doing in the US, and it was a great way to promote your product. Again, no social media, so you had to get out there and do the legwork. So for me to promote my number plates and that, what a better way to go out there and sign write it all over my ramps, and put it all over myself and the other guys, and just go out there and ride and
So who'd you have on the tour then?
So at the start, I had a guy called Ivan Voilet. He was a guy from Glen Waverley, and he was into racing, but he was into tricks. He was crazy. That guy was just so far ahead of himself. He'd make 10-foot unicycles. He'd have fixed wheel type bikes, and I'm talking really early 80s here, and he'd be doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And I'd turn up at his house and he'd say, look at what I've got and do this and do that. And he was I
Out
always
there.
looked at Ivan and thought, man, you are just at another level.
Yeah.
Your mind is just racing at 100 miles an hour. So he was fantastic, and we'd go out and do a few things, but unfortunately Ivan, because he was so into everything extreme, he started skydiving. And he did things like when they were building the Rialto building in Melbourne, he climbed the tower, the big boom at the very top of it. He jumped off that. He base jumped that and went down. And it wasn't too long after that, unfortunately, that he was out skydiving, and he was in a formation type team of skydivers, and something went wrong, and they knocked into each other in the air and knocked each other out, and unfortunately that was it. Yeah. So they all came down, and that was it. So that was, losing him was, as far as riding goes, it was devastating, because he was part of that initial, kind of freestyle move, and everybody got each other, and it was all sort of really cool. But then from that, then another door opened, and I met another guy from Bairnsdale who was a fantastic ground rider. He was just unbelievable on the ground, a little guy called Andy Matheson. And then grabbed Andy and put him on, and I sort of would take most of the ramp type work, and Andy would do all the sort of ground tricks and things like that.
Yep.
And even to a point where I'd go out and do a lot of solo stuff by myself. And I had a mate, Nick Lalatsis, who was my announcer, and he actually rode on, raced with the Cassip jersey and all that sort of thing on. And I had a few other boys, James Robinson, Lee Ford. So I had a race team going. I had my freestyle team going. I had my number plates selling. It was kind of an all-round package type thing that you kind of had to do to promote yourself.
Yeah.
So it all kind of worked hand in hand all the time. So it was just crazy times. You didn't know what was coming the next day, the next week. You just did it.
Yeah.
You just did it and hope for the hope for the best. And I think most guys were doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, was there many other tours going on in Australia at that time?
There was guys. I know there was guys
sort of
around
kicking around
in other states.
Yeah.
But because back then, everything was so large.
Yeah.
But, there was no
was
mobile
just
phones. There
exploding,
was nothing type of thing. So even getting from interstate was a big trip type of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But there was a big skate park scene happening up in Sydney.
Yeah.
At Five Dock, and you kind of hear things, but you wouldn't see it. You might see a picture in a magazine and all that. And it's funny later on in life, like I'm talking only up to the last 5 years, that I've met up with a lot of those guys from back in that day, like Mick Nealon, and unfortunately, one of the head guys. So I hear Pat Piercy, who was like the guy, Ken de Graaf, all these other guys who were up there just killing it in this skate park. So it was kind of like their scene. And then there was scenes going on in Brisbane, there was scenes going on in South Australia and Western Australia. So everybody kind of had their thing going on.
Yeah.
But it wasn't kind of interlinked. It was, back then it was so separate of what was going on.
Yeah. Which is obviously a lot different to today, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone does tours and they do the whole of Australia.
Yeah. That's
and
right.
You're all seeing the same show, whereas, like you were saying, there's all these different scenes. So Sydney, Melbourne, Queensland.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's real. I'm blown away, because nowadays, like you said, social media and that just shows us everything, and
Yes.
it gets a little bit lost too, doesn't it?
It does. I guess that was the thing. It was, I guess, and I go back to the US here, when you went on summer tour in the US, you had all the teams. You had your Haros, your GTs, all those type of people going out on tour doing things. And it was almost because there wasn't all that social media type of thing. The kids and the town kind of couldn't wait for that group to come through town.
Yeah.
And everybody almost had the same. Rockville was a huge one in the US. Like when the freestyle team turned up there, that was like almost the pinnacle of the shows. But you'd had everyone coming through, not just one brand. Everyone would go through there eventually. Yeah. But it was all probably the anticipation, like the circus coming to town.
Yeah, would be.
And everybody used to read about their heroes and see their pictures in these magazines, and then all of a sudden, bang, they're there. Yeah. Everything's set up. They're doing a show, and the place is just packed
Yeah.
with people. It's just, again, it was a whole different ball game. Just being part of that and watching how the Americans and
So which did you prefer then, doing the tours in the US or Australia?
oh, I guess the US.
Yeah,
I mean,
bigger crowds.
just turn up. It was just insane. It was just insane to see. I guess population as well. There's
Yeah.
so many more people, but the kids, you know, the enthusiasm was just. And Americans are very vocal as well. So you get to a show and
It's
people are
loud.
doing something. You know, even if it's very minor, they just get
Loving
into
it.
it.
Loving it.
Where, you know, Australia, people are a little bit more reserved. They wouldn't go too crazy. You know, you get
Yeah.
more sort of up there with when you were riding the ramp, not so much when you were on the ground doing things.
Yeah.
But America was just kind of this all-around craziness all the time, and it was fantastic when you used to roll up to a venue. You'd cross over with teams like in 1987 when I can't remember where we were. It might have been Texas or something. We crossed over with Skyway, and that was
Yeah.
the first time I seen Matt Hoffman. Now he was 14 or 15 years old, we had just done a show there, and then the Skyway team were there. So it was him, Ronnie Harrow, who was Bob's brother.
Yep.
He was running the team, and Scotty Freeman and them. And they set up to do their show. But I'll never forget that time when Matt Hoffman suited up with like a Bell Moto 3 on, and he put on this
Body armor.
body armour, and I'm looking over at this kid thinking to myself, geez, what's this kid doing? And he looked like he was going to race motocross.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he just let fly.
Exploded.
And he actually let fly on our ramp, not his. And he
Yeah.
didn't even practice. He just hit it and just pulled massive air straight away. And I can still see it in my head today, just looking at this kid going,
You just be going, oh no, it's just
Holy
the bar's
moly.
been moved again.
yeah, this is just somewhere else. And it's going somewhere else. And Matt was like one of those guys, again, he was like this next version of craziness.
Yeah.
And just to stand there and watch him do that, and I just so glad that I had that, especially at that time when he was so young.
Yeah.
And he was getting into it, and what he did was just, it was something else. It was
Yeah.
something else.
Well, I'm sure it would have been like all the kids looking at you guys going, this is next level stuff. You're now looking at that going, oh no.
It was almost one of these
Did
moments.
you
know?
get scared that you had to then perform that after him?
Nah, we were lucky. We started before him, and then they came on after us.
No, but I mean, like, you're looking at that going, now we've got to learn that. We've got to do that in our next shows kind of deal. Were you worried about that?
I think every rider knew that, like, he was taking this whole freestyle thing to another level
Did you
on
just sort of
ramps.
go and whisper in his ear, hey, tame it down a bit, you're showing us all up here?
I think he was just in shock. I was certainly in shock just watching this kid do what he was doing. I'd never
Yeah.
seen, like, Josh White and all those guys. Yeah, I mean, they were just unbelievable, and they were at that level of Matt. But
Yeah.
Matt seemed to start putting combinations in, like taking arms and legs and this and that, but not just doing one thing at a time when he went up the ramp. He was doing
Combining
combinations
it,
of things.
yeah.
You know, like he'd do a no hand and no foot or something else, whatever, and then come back, where everyone was only doing one thing up there, and it was just like, oh, wow, this is insane, you know. So I mean, definitely Matt just took it somewhere else.
Yeah,
Somewhere else.
it would have been exciting to watch.
Oh, definitely. Again, just being around the vibe of the whole
I
thing.
mean, I've certainly seen the old video footage, but to have been there and seen it in real life would just be on another level.
Yeah.
It'd be great. You know, it's like what we see today with new tricks.
Yeah.
But back then, wow. And to not even know where it was going to go from there.
No, that's
know?
right. Who would, you know, I guess it's funny because probably back then people talked about things like backflips and all that sort of thing. You know, Matt made it happen.
Yeah.
He made it happen. And next minute you're looking in a magazine and who's the person doing it? It was Matt Hoffman.
It's funny you should mention the backflips and that, because we sat down not long ago and we were looking back at who was the first person to basically do the backflip on BMX. And it ended up being some Spanish guy or something who did it in Rad.
Yeah.
He was in the movie Rad. And we started looking back at all the history and how far back he'd been doing backflips before people were even doing them. He was doing them on motorbikes even.
Yeah, that's
Like,
right.
It's crazy to think that these people have been around for so long and unheard of or anything. And until guys like yourself and go and see these people and then see them doing these tricks, they didn't really exist or anything. And just mind blown, basically.
Yeah.
Like
But
what Matt was, no one knew about what he was doing and all that. And then all of a sudden turns up to this show and everyone's just like jaw to the ground sort of thing. You know, it would have been great.
Yeah, but you're right. I think that fella's name was Jose.
That's it. Yes.
And definitely he had brought that into BMX and was regarded as the first guy backflipping.
Yeah.
Then.
And even in magazines and that, there were some magazines from what I read, good old Wikipedia, that the magazines wouldn't even post the photo of him doing a backflip.
Oh, really?
Because they believed it was too dangerous that people would try it and therefore wouldn't put it in their magazines.
Yeah,
and
right.
there was only one magazine who showed it, and it had a warning content on the page saying this is too extreme, be very careful kind of deal.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
it was kind of way ahead of what else was going on at the time. I don't know if really people looked at it and thought, well, I'm going to have a go at that, or no, good luck with that.
Did you ever?
No.
Why
no,
not?
Never. No.
Oh, come on, we'll get you in the skate shed now.
No.
Foam pit. We'll put you in the foam pit.
I guess riding, there was always someone out there better than you, and there was guys out there better than him.
But it was never like that though, was it? It was never, oh, he's better than everyone. It was more of, look what he can do, I'm going to try other things or whatever. There was never that, you know, you're better than everyone else kind of deal in BMX, was it?
I guess sometimes it was, but probably more, you know, maybe people just trying to stir the pot type of thing. I mean, I certainly didn't. I certainly did. It was funny when we were on like US tour, you would go and watch just local kids.
Yeah.
And you would think, why am I sponsored? Why am I wearing this jersey? Look at this kid.
Yeah.
This kid he's crazy. He's unbelievable. He should have a jersey on.
Yeah.
He should have a jersey on. But there were so many people like that out there. Maybe you were lucky. You were in the right spot at the right
place, right time, like you said.
You know, knew the right people. But I think everybody brought something different to it, and maybe your sponsors. You didn't have to just be a great rider, because there was a lot of good riders out there, but
We had
maybe
to be
not
the
great
complete
personalities.
package, more likely. The personality, the whole bit, you know.
Yeah, and I think if anyone who have any type of product, you'd like the person to be good at what they do, but you'd like to be even better at promoting your product, and that's talking with people, having time for people, all that kind of thing. So that's probably more valuable than how good you are on a bike or driving a car or whatever.
Well, I mean, that would reflect in what you started doing with your own team, cassette plates and all that sort of stuff. If you didn't have the personality behind you, or, you know, didn't get along with people, it wasn't going to grow, was it?
That's right, yeah. And I think, you know, my father always told me right from the word go when I raced motorcycles, there's always someone better out there than you.
Yeah, ain't that true?
And that's true in most things. It's like, you know, there's always someone richer than you. There's always someone better than you. You know, there's always going to be people moving the bar even further.
Yeah.
You might start it, but someone will take it a lot further than what you have.
And the team, I mean, cassette plates and that. So was that basically started to fund your own team and touring and all that?
Actually,
How did the plates and everything come about?
The plates came about, was actually my brother, my older brother. I don't think he remembers this, but he was in the garage one day at our house, and he bought a number plate. And I mean, to spend probably at the time $10 on a piece of plastic for the front of your bike, that was a bit of money.
Yeah.
And he had his brake levers on his bike, and he had to cut the actual wing part, which was a Haro plate. He had to cut the wings on it with a
You've
knife.
just made a lot of people cringe by saying cutting a Haro plate.
Yeah.
These things are worth a fortune now.
So he cut these. He cut it to fit in with the levers, so it sat flat on the handlebars. And I watched it, and I sort of thought to myself, okay, you know, I felt like he was destroying this plate, and I was cringing.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't have the money to go out and buy one of those plates. It seems crazy because I had a motorcycle sitting right next to me, and I looked at my motorcycle and I saw the way my plate was on my motorcycle, and I loved the way the plates looked on the BMX bikes, but I kind of wanted to do just my own thing.
Yeah.
And I looked at my motorcycle plate and I thought, wow, that looks really motocross kind of looking. I want to try and do a version of that for a BMX bike. So the time I went down to just not far from here actually, I went down and scavenged through a bin and got a whole heap of plastic out, went home and started drawing up all different designs and this, that and the rest of it. And I probably made half a dozen designs on the floor of my dad's garage and stuck them on the bike, and they were moving everywhere, and they were useless, and they were this and they were that. Well, finally I sort of came up with that strapped style and wrapped it over and got it working. And then I thought, wow, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then I just got some contact off my mum and some Letraset, which was that old rub down type of letters, and I put it all on, and then that was it really. From there I went down again the local jumps, and everyone said, oh wow, where'd you get that? I said, I made it up. And then everyone said, oh, can I have one? So I didn't really want any money for it. I was just thrilled that someone wanted one. So I just started making up a few and giving them around to my friends. But then from that, it snowballed. Then people kept asking me for them. Oh, we'll buy them off you. We'll buy them off you.
Yeah.
And then from there, that's really where my number plates started. It was a concept that I don't think I even thought at the start.
How some of the greatest businesses have started, really, isn't it?
Manufacturing them. And then when I sort of thought, okay, there's something here, off I went.
Yeah.
But again, at that time, I didn't have any money. So I had this idea, but I had no money. So my dad took me down to the bank and made me borrow money like everybody else. And I came back, so I had that hanging over my head. And I just got all these plates made. And at the start, it was pretty hard because, you know, I was just a young kid, and I probably had a bit of an attitude and long hair, and I didn't look like the model type business kid or person to get something going. And I had a few guys who actually believed in me, older type of people who had businesses at the time. Yeah. So they sort of backed me and said, yeah, kid, I'll give you a go, type of thing. So one guy cut them out, one guy printed the things, the plates, and off we went. And I sold the first 500 within, I can't even remember, but it was so quick. And I borrowed $2,000 from the bank, and I slapped it back on the kitchen table with my dad and said, there's your $2,000, let's go.
Yeah.
So, I knew I had something, and then off I went with it.
Perfect.
So it was good, but probably the biggest thing I'm thrilled about with the number plate side of it was coming up with a design that was
unique
from everything else at the time. And then further down the track, everybody else started making strapped style number plates for their bikes. So whether they,
we'll take it that they copied you. We'll take that. We'll put that one in the back pocket.
So that was kind of cool.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah. I didn't really care if there was money involved in it or not.
Yeah.
I couldn't buy
the fact you were going around the world riding your bike, basically.
Yeah, I couldn't buy that experience. You couldn't put a money value on it. It was just fantastic. It was the same as like touring with Bob.
Yeah.
Here, I just can't put a value on it.
Yeah.
I can't put a value on any of those experiences. It's just there's no money value to it. It's just something that I just feel fortunate and lucky that I did it, and I, was lucky enough to ride with just the icons of BMX, which is Australian guys and the American guys as well.
Well, like you said, it was right place, right time. It was when everything was starting to happen. You just happened to be there, didn't you?
Yeah, I think that, that old saying, if you make your own luck, if that's the case, I just kept pushing it all the time. I never walked away from anything. I never accepted no. If someone said no, well, that just pushed me even further. Okay. Well, I got to go now. I got to keep going. So, I think but BMX as well. From those early days, riding, wanted to be probably like any kid, good at riding, good at what you do. My number plate business, trying to get that going, everything else. That was like going to school really. When I look back, as an older person looking back, the education that gave me for life, I owe my life now to where I'm at in my
Yeah.
life to BMX, because BMX set me down all those paths to learn all those things
Yeah.
and not give up and everything else. I put it all back to BMX.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't involved in BMX, I mean, God, that's the $1 million question. Where would you be?
Yeah. True.
But you know, that's certainly, I look back and think that gave me
Yeah.
everything that I needed, the tools in life to keep going. Yeah, it was invaluable doing it.
Yeah.
Whether they were good, they cost you, you know, you were anything else with it. It was just a great time.